very welcome. I have a little bit of a broadband, what would I say, issue. So I may switch off my video once I've said hello to you, but thanks everybody for joining us today. What we're going to speak to you about is our experience of translating universal design for learning policy into practice. And the way that we've approached that is through the development of a toolkit for Moodle, which draws on the UDL principles and offers practical advice and tools for academics at DCU to translate those principles into practice. And whoops, okay, there we go. Just to give you an overview of our presentation, Karen is going to introduce you to Universal Design for Learning very briefly. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the Universal Design for Learning principles, but just to frame the discussion around the toolkit, then I'm going to link the work of the UDL toolkit to the DigComp Edu framework, and also make reference to some of the findings from the index survey that was published last week. We're going to give you an overview of the components of the toolkit, and then back to Karen. She's going to speak to you about the development process of the toolkit and a little bit about feedback from our pilot users. And then we'll just wrap up by outlining our next steps, which includes the sharing of the toolkit through Creative Commons structures soon enough, probably in June, all going well. So with that, I'm going to pass you over to Karen.
Thanks, Suzanne. So I suppose to briefly provide a quick overview about Universal Design for Learning, it's a framework essentially to improve and to optimize teaching, learning and assessment by removing barriers in the environment, both physical and virtual. So we think that small considered changes to practice can make the curriculum accessible for everyone. And essentially it ensures that a high quality of education for students can still happen, and certainly provides for full and very active participation for learners. So this practice improves student engagement and retention while positively enhancing the learning experience for everyone. UDL promotes the use of multiple approaches in teaching, learning and assessment, and it's encompassed by three main principles. So they are the multiple means of representation, multiple means of student engagement, and multiple means of action or expression. So UDL is considered best practice for inclusion by suggesting flexible instructional materials, techniques, and strategies that can empower educators to meet the varied needs of learners. So the three principles of UDL can help us refine how we approach who we teach, what we teach, and also how we teach. And as we all know, technology enables the quick modification of learning materials to meet the specific needs of our students. But it also means that virtual learning environments such as Moodle are really well placed to address the goal of universal design for learning. So it's the responsibility of institutions and developers who maintain these environments to plan for inclusive practice. In DCU, we recognise that learning is a partnership between learners and teachers, and we hope to employ student-centred learning design where the student voice is heard and that informs the design and implementation of the learning experiences. So in order to enhance this inclusivity of the learning experience, what we intend to do is to promote the principles of UDL in the design and delivery of all of our programs. And I suppose now more than ever, we're required to design our programs to allow more flexible delivery online and also using the technology that is available to us. So to fulfil the commitment that's outlined in the DCU strategic plan and the constituent teaching and learning strategies, we've tried to draw on expertise and best practice across DCU and beyond to implement a UDL pedagogic framework to underpin our institutional approach to teaching, learning and assessment. So maybe Suzanne will discuss the European framework for digital competencies. And really, I suppose what we're looking at here is number 5, empowering learners.
Thanks, Karen, and apologies if I got the timing on moving the slides a little bit wrong.
Not at all, perfect.
Okay, so the work of the UDL toolkit speaks to the dimension number 5 in the DigComp Edu framework, which is called empowering learners. And this dimension is broken down into 3 parts. The first relates to accessibility and inclusion, which obviously speaks to developing learning resources and activities that are accessible to all learners, but it also speaks to considering learners' expectations and their digital abilities or capacities. And the next part of this dimension, differentiation and personalization, explores offering choice to learners, so perhaps allowing learners to advance at their own pace through a piece of learning, or to develop the development of individual learning pathways. And then the final part or aspect of the dimension is the active engagement of learners, both in terms of engaging with the content and then engaging with a creative expression of their learning. Okay, so you can see how those 3 aspects of Dimension 5 connect quite easily with the Universal Design for Learning principles. The first one, accessibility and inclusion, connects to multiple means of representation. Differentiation and personalization then connects to multiple means of engagement. And then the active engagement of learners speaks to 2 of the principles, multiple means of engagement and multiple means of action or expression. And we wanted, because the index survey is hot off the press, we just wanted to mention 2 findings from that report very briefly that are relevant to the UDL toolkit. Students have called in the survey for consistency around the use of the VLE, and we feel that the UDL toolkit offers some opportunities and tools for staff to create consistency in their use of the VLE. And the other finding that stood out to us when we were preparing for this session was that students are calling for improved navigation and signposting in the use of the VLE, which we also feel the toolkit can offer some guidance and support around. So the toolkit itself comprises of 3 different parts. The first is an introduction or overview of UDL, which is available in both text and video format in line with Universal Design for Learning principles. The second piece is a Moodle template, which I'm going to show to you shortly, which seeks to address the issues raised in the index survey around creating some consistency in the use of VLE. And then we've got a series of UDL checklists, which we hope will also support engagement with UDL principles for staff. So just bear with me because I want to share the template with you. So I need to get another screen up. If anybody can sing while I'm just getting this up, that would... Okay. And there we go. Apologies. Okay, so you can see that the template is very, very simple. It's not a very complicated toolkit. You will see over here on the right, we've got a little section for the course outline or the contact details of the lecture, and also a placeholder, an image placeholder, where we're encouraging people to pop a picture of themselves up just to orient the students. And their office hours is the last kind of suggestion that we have in that section. We've got in the introductory section of the page, we've got automatically an announcement or course news forum. We've also added an ask a question forum, the DCU academic integrity and plagiarism policy. And then we've popped in a template for a Moodle handbook, where we're hoping that people will populate with material related to their own specific module. And then very importantly, over on the left, we've got by default the accessibility toolbar available within the template. Karen is going to speak to you more about the development of the toolkit, but one of the surprises that we had when we began developing the toolkit was how few people were actually aware of this toolbar or block within Moodle. and how well received it was when they became aware of the accessibility block. So that's here by default in our template as part of the toolkit. Okay, stop sharing, back to the slides. Bear with me a moment. Okay, here we go. So then we've got our UDL guideline checklists. And the idea here is that we've provided a range of checklist types for staff. Originally, what we thought was that we would present these options to staff and that they would select their preferred type of checklist. But actually the feedback to us was that they'd like to have all of the checklist types available in the toolkit, and that they would choose the appropriate toolkit or checklist for their particular context at any particular time. So you'll see the first one here is a tick box kind of checklist, which goes through each of the UDL principles and then breaks it down into checkpoints around the guidelines. So people just have a look at the suggestions there, and they tick the box if they've met all of the requirements. The next one is the educator checklist, which was developed by CAST. And this again breaks down each of the UDL principles and then the subheadings. But here they offer kind of ideas or examples around how you might address each of those checkpoints on the UDL principle list. And it also offers some space for your own ideas or notes over here to the right. So it's a little step up from the last one. And then our final checklist type is a progression rubric adapted from a rubric designed by Melissa Toland. We have the reference in these slides, which will be shared later. And what we did was we took Melissa's design and we incorporated the dimensions of the 3 framework developed by Napier University to support the engagement of staff with technology enhanced learning. So we took those 3 dimensions and we mapped them onto Melissa's design. So you'll see here on the left, you've got your checkpoint relating to principle 1. And then at each dimension of the framework, there are some examples and definitions offered within the breakdown of the checkpoints. So you'll see here, using Melissa's language, if you're at a level of emerging practice in UDL, you've got your choices here at checkpoint 1, checkpoint 2, checkpoint 3. Then you can move on to proficient and finally to expert level. And we've mapped those on using the language of the 3 framework: enhance, extend, and empower. Okay, so I'm going to pass back to Karen, who's going to speak to you a little bit about how we actually developed the toolkit.
Thanks, Suzanne. I suppose taken from our experience as learning technologists and academic developers, we really thought about designing and developing the process of the toolkit really to be in consultation and partnership with our colleagues. We can all agree and we all know that we're all busy, and I suppose we didn't want to just start designing the toolkit without consultation. We wanted to really try to empower educators and empower those who teach across the university, and to really make this toolkit useful and beneficial for them and their practice. So what we wanted to do was to try and sketch an outline of exactly what would be useful, I guess, what would be a kind of a starting point perhaps for our colleagues. And really this started with a focus group. So what we wanted to do was to engage those who teach. We wanted to pilot with 2 faculties who had different experiences, I guess, and engagement with Moodle. And we wanted them to kind of tell us what exactly they need. We wanted this to be something that enhances their practice, but not so burdensome or not so cumbersome that would stop them in their tracks to implement a UDL template just like this. So that consultation, or that initial focus groups, were really informative for us in designing and outlining some of the resources that Suzanne has just shared with you as well. So in piloting our toolkit, oh, thanks, Suzanne. In piloting our toolkit, really what we wanted to do was get a sense of what exactly works for them. We wanted to actually try and get into a conversation with meaningful engagement with our colleagues. And what we discovered was that UDL was broadly understood by our participants. They definitely aligned the 3 principles of UDL to look like good teaching, good learning, and fair assessment. So the idea of the toolkit was a nice way to scaffold and to use maybe stepping stones, perhaps, in applying the principles of UDL in their use of Moodle for teaching, learning, and assessment. So in designing the toolkit, I suppose on some of the results of the piloting and what we actually discovered in consultation with our colleagues was actually that we needed lots of time. And I suppose each of our participants agreed that they wanted plenty of time to be able to practically apply these templates and these resources and any small or significant changes that they were making in their loop pages. The fact that Suzanne and I were present in this focus group or this semi-structured support session was also really important to help us design and to explore what was working well for the faculties who were testing this out. I think some of the real benefits of allowing the time and the space for colleagues to be able to sit with us, to be able to take some time out of their day to redesign or to reimagine what their Moodle pages look like, really allowed and opened up a conversation for what was important for both the lecturers and their students as well. With regards, I suppose, to what also, I suppose, ensures that we're always, or we're continuing to design approaches that are efficient and are worthwhile for our student experience was really just about asking our colleagues what were maybe the most frequently asked questions, or what were maybe some of the difficulties and what they perceived as barriers to learning for their students. And we were really encouraged, I suppose, looking at the responses to the pilot group, we were really encouraged to see that it provided the use of these kind of templates and these progression checklists provided clarity for the students, allowed our colleagues to be able to organise their loop pages in a way that was able to respond effectively to maybe some of the common barriers or some of the common questions for our students as well. And you'll see some of the pilot group responses presented on this slide. Some of our participants responded that they've completely changed all of their loop pages, which was really encouraging, and ultimately that made them maybe much tidier and perhaps more clearer for the students to be able to access information and resources. Also setting up things like tasks in a considered way allowed for the students to maybe engage a little bit deeper in some of the concepts or some of the ideas that were being shared as well. So all in all, I suppose, while we're still, I suppose, want to roll this out into an institution-wide rollout, hopefully in September, we think this is a really good opportunity. And with all of the difficulties surrounding the last few months with the shutdown of our institutions, we're really seeing that UDL can be an opportunity for our faculty to be able to engage with these principles of inclusion, to ensure that as they're redesigning and redeveloping their Moodle pages for next semester, that these toolkits and these checklists and these templates can be helpful for them redesigning or reimagining what their loop pages look like. I suppose to move on to maybe the next steps, perhaps. What we would like to do is also get your feedback essentially and trying to get a sense of what exactly is working in your institutions and to share what works best. We're going to be further developing the toolkit, again, trying to have this kind of breadth across the institutions for all faculties, and particularly perhaps for those faculties or those staff who aren't familiar with the UDL principles, and also offer to deliver this and develop this with staff in a scaffolded process. That was something that worked really, really well with our colleagues. But also we'd like to share this toolkit with you as Moodle users as well, to see how it can be adapted or how it can be implemented in your institutions. So finally, I think we would just like to thank you for attending this presentation. We'd love to welcome your feedback. As Suzanne mentioned earlier, the toolkit's going to be available through Creative Commons in June. And we'd love to open up to any questions that you may have.